What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed. Where me and my good friend Brian over there, who apparently I haven't talked to in a very long time, uh, talk about comics that have been adapted into movies and streaming shows. Now, the Acolyte has been over for a little while now, but Brian and I still have to cover that last episode. So, Brian, we might get a little philosophical and a little deep today. Is that cool?
Ooh, okay, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you a philosophical question right off the bat. What do you personally think the point or like the main theme of Star Wars is?
The main theme of Star Wars? I
Or
have
like, what's
no
the idea?
idea. Um,
Okay.
I feel like it's I don't know because it depends on what part of Star Wars you're looking at. I guess. I
Okay.
mean, I guess the main theme is just a galaxy far, far away. Really, it's just something that's different. That's not real.
Okay. So you think like there's so many different parts to Star Wars that you can't really say it's like one type of story.
Yes, I mean, I guess you could generally say that there's a hero's journey baked into everything for the most part. Um, but other than that, I think you have to be more specific about what aspect you're talking about to get to that kind of
Okay.
answer. I think.
Did you by any chance get to watch that Thor Skywalker video that I shared in the chat with Danny and
I don't think I finished it, and when I was watching it, it was a week ago, so I don't remember much.
Oh my god, oh my god. Well, let me bring that up real quick. So for the most part, I actually stay away from negative reviews of the things that we cover because a lot of the times the negative reviews are so negative and so toxic that I get worried that it might influence what I'm saying on this show. And I also just kind of don't want that like toxic attitude, right?
Agreed.
But I also kind of feel like you could have a negative review of something and not like have this toxic edge to it. It could be because you're literally talking about the story or the message or the idea. And did you remember anything from that video at all or no?
I'm guessing no. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. The reason why I wanted to use that video as kind of like a talking piece is because the guy, who whatever his real name is, Thor Skywalker, he was saying that he felt like the main idea of Star Wars was like people kind of like sacrificing or kind of not just thinking about themselves, but thinking about others. And he said that like the Jedi kind of embody that. And one point that I wanted to get your opinion on was he felt like yes, the Jedi are looked at as flawed in George Lucas's own vision in the prequels, but in the original trilogy, they're looked at as like the type of hero you want to become. Like Lucas trying to become a Jedi, and he kind of feels like Disney has really put all their chips into the idea of that the Jedi are bad, or at least like so flawed to where they are causing bad things to happen in the galaxy. And I
Well, I
wanted to
mean,
get your opinion on that.
it sounds like it's a case of hero worship, really. You have this ideal, thought of a depiction of a hero, and it doesn't exist anymore. And it's kind of like looking at the past and thinking times were better.
Mm-hmm.
And when maybe realistically they weren't because you're used looking at it in rose-colored glasses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really could be the case here. Is that with their absence and the onset of the empire, it's like looking back, it's like, oh shit, the Jedi were like pretty cool and pretty good. But when you go back into it, it's like they're the same as any government essentially. They're flawed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like when you look at the original trilogy, like okay, here's the thing, right? I think that with the internet and with like fandom, people analyze every fucking thing to the 10th degree. I mean, that's what we do on this channel, right? And I
Yep.
think that like they look at every little story beat and they make things just to it's almost like when you make a thesis paper for college. I don't even know if kids fucking do that anymore, but like you highlight like a specific part and you're like, this is what I believe based on this. And I think that like one thing that people would do from the original trilogy, they'd be like, Obi-Wan lied. Obi-Wan lied to Luke about his dad, and I think that people would kind of focus on that. And the prequels just kind of like reinforce that because the Jedi seem so inept. But like, what did you take from the Jedi in the prequel era? like the prequel trilogy?
A kind of bloated, inefficient governing body or police body or something like that. You know, they were kind of in over their heads, and you know, they're not everybody was on the up and up necessarily. Not everything was bad, but it's just, you know, they are flawed, and I think that makes them more interesting.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
I think if you take the idea that you're talking about of the Jedi from the original trilogy, that this kind of like perfect hero, I don't think that's as interesting as someone that, I mean, and Luke himself is flawed as well. I mean, he does give into his emotions at time, and you know that's very un-Jedi like, according to the, you know, how they spoke about them then.
Yeah, their dogma and stuff. That's a good point. I want to kind of tie it into comics then, right? Like you and I love X-Men. We love the X-Men so much.
Oh yeah.
Would you say that like the X-Men are flawed, or like?
Oh yes.
All right, go.
Yeah. Well, yes.
So elaborate on that. Tell me.
I mean, use Beast as an example. Beast in the Krakoan era. He was doing all these things that he believed was for the betterment of mutant kind, but he was doing some real shady stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that proves that even and he's generally considered one of the, you know, if you look at like especially the animated depiction of him, he's like so nice and happy and good and all that like the embodiment of something you might think a Jedi would be, honestly. But he turned to the dark side essentially, you know. So right. I mean, perfect example of a flaw in the system.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because like I think the X-Men are flawed, especially like when you look at the Krakoan era, right? Because all the things they do on like the Quiet Council, like Professor X, he goes back and forth between being a villain, right? Even Cyclops goes back and forth between being a villain.
Yeah, because they're tackling the same problems, but in different ways. I mean, also if you think about it too, you know, there was that argument that in the Krakoan era where, you know, the mutants were giving humans like this flower that was extending their life and curing diseases, but they essentially used it as a carrot, you know, to get what they wanted, you know.
Right.
They didn't just give it out. They said like, oh, we'll give you this, but you have to recognize us as a nation. So they were using it as an incentive, really. So that's kind of flawed, honestly.
Oh yeah. And it's so funny because we're coming up on Deadpool and Wolverine, and like Wolverine, honestly, he doesn't really make those kind of corrupt decisions. He does like brutal things, and he's like a soldier that they'll send to do things, but they usually don't show him kind of compromising his morals. Have you ever noticed that?
They try to, especially since the Schism era, where they kind of flipped him a little bit, him and Cyclops a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I think so, but I do think that he has taken that petty revenge path often.
Oh, okay.
So I think he's flawed as well. Everybody really is.
Yeah. Okay. So he's flawed. It's just maybe not like a corruption thing. Because like a lot of the times, and we can bring it back to Star Wars now and the Jedi, especially in this episode of the Acolyte, there's the idea of like doing things because, you know, maybe for the greater good, or at least for the greater good of like your organization that's supposed to like keep the peace, you cover up things or you do things that are considered wrong, but you do them. And I feel like Wolverine doesn't necessarily do that, but he is a flawed guy in the sense that like, yeah, he has like a really short temper. He's really blunt. And he also can be like kind of petty with his teammates and his enemies, right?
Yeah. And interesting too, there's different kinds of ways to look at this too. Is like, if you want to compare like Indara to Soul, his flaw is that he was selfishly looking for a Padawan, and he felt this connection, and he was willing to do anything to get to you know, follow that feeling of connection that he wanted, that he felt with Osha. But then you look at someone like Indara, who's like, oh shit, these people fucked up. What am I gonna do? How do we just damage control this? We sweep it under the rug.
Yeah,
that's flawed as well. But I mean, you know, which one's worse? It depends on how you look at it.
Now, And this could apply to Endara too, but were you meaning Endara like Trinity, or were you meaning oh, okay, not what's her face, Vernestra?
Not Vernestra. No. Man, Vernestra's a better question. I don't feel like we got as clear of. Oh no, yeah, she does that. Oh yeah, she does the same thing as Endara. Yeah, at the end, you're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's sweeping something under the rug. She's using someone as a guinea pig, essentially, a scapegoat, not a guinea pig, a scapegoat.
Yeah.
To kind of sweep the operation under the rug to make, to kind of not put the Jedi in a bad place.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about that covering up and stuff like that, but let's kind of talk about the events that lead to that. Before we get to that, though, I had this ticker here. It's kind of random, but I want to just wedge it in here awkwardly. Wedge, pun intended. So right now, I've been just reading the shit out of Marvel Unlimited Star Wars comics, right? Like I've just been going through them because I just finished that Krakoa Age series. Now I'm reading like Star Wars Bounty Hunters, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, and of course the main Star Wars book. Do you know anything about any of those titles?
Nope. I might have bought some earlier stuff of that from Comixology, but I don't think I've gotten around to reading it.
Okay. So how about this? I'm going to do a very, very brief synopsis of what's going on in the Star Wars comics, and I want you to tell me which one you'd be the most interested in, okay?
Sure.
Very brief. Okay. So basically, the Star Wars comics have gone from the end of A New Hope to where they are currently right now, which is between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And we're getting closer to Return of the Jedi. And in the various books, we see the aftermath of Han Solo being put in carbonite. We had this crossover event with all the books called The War of the Bounty Hunters, where like Han doesn't just get taken to Jabba's palace. He's like, the Empire gets him back at one point. Boba Fett gets him. Jabba puts a bounty on Boba Fett's head. There's all this shit going on. And then you have like all the bounty hunters like Bosk and Forlom and Zuckuss, all those guys, Dengar. Dr. Aphra is a really interesting book because she is an original character. She's kind of like a criminal Indiana Jones, but she's, a woman, right? And it's she's cool. She, like, her book has almost exclusively new characters where there's no other like main Star Wars characters with her. And she's like kind of always in these like heists and stuff, but the heists always involve archaeology then in the Star Wars universe. In the main Star Wars comic, like in all of the Star Wars comics in general, you have this great kind of like stew that you're making where you have stuff that's like referenced from the sequel trilogy and then the stuff from the prequels, and it's all happening during the classic trilogy time, right? So you have like stuff from the Clone Wars, then all of a sudden you'll have like the Knights of Ren, and you'll have like all this shit just kind of peppered in there, and it's really great. And then last but not least, the Darth Vader comic, at least where I'm up to right now, he is on a mission trying to take down Crimson Dawn. Do you remember what Crimson Dawn is?
Yeah, that's the organization from the Han Solo movie, right?
Yeah. And it's run by Kira, who I can't remember. What's the actress name that plays Daenerys?
Oh my God, Emilia Clarke.
Thank you, sir. From that amazing show, Secret Empire. She runs Crimson Dawn now. She took over after Darth Maul died in the Clone Wars the Rebels cartoon. And like there's been a lot of stuff with Crimson Dawn. And so Darth Vader's trying to take Crimson Dawn down. And he's actually teaming up with one of the handmaidens that pretended to look like Padme, who's still alive. Her name's Sabe. So essentially it would be the
Keira Knightley?
Keira Knightley.
Okay.
So I know I just talked a lot, but do any of those books sound interesting to you?
Yeah, honestly, they all kind of do. I feel like the time between those movies is very interesting, and I feel like most of the things we've gotten with them have not. I don't know. Never mind that. The time between the movies is very interesting to me, and we've kind of sailed past the ship, I think, for live action versions of that. I think they're hesitant to recast some of those characters. So I think comics is the perfect medium to do that. And I know they've done this before with comics and novels and to flesh that out, but just something about the interconnectivity that this kind of series sounds like they bring
Yeah.
makes it more interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. And you bring up a really great point of like how they can't really do like a live action version of this stuff without like recasting, Luke and Leia and stuff because they are in the regular Star Wars comic. Um but I think that the energy that's in these comics is what's lacking from the Disney Plus shows. That's the reason why I brought this whole point up is because you could have more stuff in that sort of Mandalorian era, which is after the main trilogy, and you could kind of tie it all in. And maybe that is what they're trying to do with the Mandalorian, but they do so much more world building in the comics, and you kind of start to worry about characters if they're going to live and die because they're not necessarily main characters that oh, okay, they're in The Last Jedi, or oh, they're in this. So I like that about the comics very much. And if you guys are 15 minutes into our video and you were dissatisfied with the Acolyte, I would recommend maybe checking out some of these Star Wars comics. And they have a whole High Republic like series of books too, if you do like the Acolyte.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, too, they're wrapping up this era in Star Wars and those Marvel comics, and they're going to jump to that area after Return of the Jedi, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think so. Yeah, they're wrapping up the High Republic era. That's for sure. There's only like maybe 2 or 3 books left, and then this show was supposed to be like the end of the era. And it seems like the end of the era is with these 2 potential Sith, right? And so by the end of this show, we have what we think are May and then this guy who we're calling Quamir being Sith, possibly. And the whole, one of the main through lines for this whole show was the idea of May killing Saul, or killing without using a weapon. Did you take it as killing without a weapon meant you were force choking someone after you watched this episode?
I mean, that seems to be the easiest point to jump to.
Yeah.
Using the Force, it's not necessarily a weapon, although you can kind of argue that, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like we usually say with this, how we talk about our fantasy booking and all that, but what ends up happening is usually the kind of simplest thing there is, and that really is the simplest answer to that question. Like, how do you kill someone without a weapon?
Yeah. And so it kind of comes to pass. We're going to go over the events in a second, but like it kind of seems like the way that they symbolically end this High Republic era in the show is it's like, oh, well, here are the Sith. The Sith have been here all along, and now they're going to kind of lead towards Palpatine's rise. And then like another way they show the end of the High Republic era is they have the idea that the Jedi are now going to be like scrutinized by the Senate. And so I kind of wanted to see what you thought about that scene where there's that one Senator Rayencourt, talking to Vernestra. What'd you think of that?
I was very shocked to see John Jones in Star Wars.
Yes. That guy, he's been in a lot too. He was in Homeland. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh my God, you're right. He was. I think it was an interesting thing that angle to take there, and especially when you consider the reasoning for why Vernestra kind of pins everything on Soul in the end there. Because if they didn't, imagine how much worse it would be. Because it's clearly that is shown to justify Vernestra's actions, I think.
Yeah.
Because if they knew that, if the Senate knew that there was these Sith people out there and that things can get worse, like they would probably like dismantle the Jedi legally.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually could.
Yeah. And so it comes back to this like kind of argument that we've been talking about so far of like, do you cover things up if it's going to preserve the order that keeps the peace, or by trying to cover things up, you just make things worse, right? Because did you kind of take it like this act of like covering this up would eventually lead to the downfall of the Jedi? Did you take it that way or no?
I think if they didn't cover it up, it would have.
Okay.
I mean, both. I mean, we know it happens regardless. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But it's just, this is supposed to be a different era where the Jedi are more prominent and they're more visible, even more so than the prequel movies. And we are kind of seeing how had to be the very, very beginnings of their downfall.
Yeah, because it's funny because they're so involved in politics, and I think like the thing that really puts the nail in the coffin in the prequels is that they like become generals and stuff for the Republic, and then I mean that does literally lead to their downfall because they're like surrounded by clone troopers, and the clone troopers take them out, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about the events that lead to this cover up that we're talking about. So there's this really great chase sequence when May is able to get away from, Saul, and she's in the rings of this planet. And I kind of felt like no one's talking about this cool sequence. Like I thought it looked really good. What do you think of that sequence?
It did look really good. And this is a point you brought up earlier on in the show and the reviews too, that they don't really show much action in space.
Yeah.
And with I guess one of the exceptions being, there were a couple scenes later in Ahsoka that did that. But yeah, no, it was good there. But I think, I mean, everyone was really focusing on what happens on Brendock here, and the reveals and the confrontations hit there. So I mean, really, the biggest thing that I read about after the show ended was the lightsaber change, the lightsaber bleeding.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to have a problem with that. Even like previously, everyone had the problem with how May and Osha were created. Same vein with the lightsaber thing is just that has been far and away the largest hitting point or hating point of this show.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's kind of jump ahead for a second. So basically we have this confrontation. We'll go into more detail about it in a minute, but we have this confrontation between like Saul and Quamir, and then like May and Osha fight each other. At one point though, Saul's on the ground, Quamir's like off to the side, and then Osha takes Saul's lightsaber, and she's like, he's revealing to her the backstory or what happened to her mother, and she's getting so mad she's holding the lightsaber up and it turns red. She's bleeding the lightsaber. And my friend Jay, he did this thing where he sent me a message. A guy was saying that like, oh, so Anakin's lightsaber doesn't turn red when he's like slaughtering younglings. And I actually, okay, I want to hear what you thought of that first off, and then I want to tell you one thing.
You mean of that comparison?
Yeah.
I think they're two different things. I think and I'm going to justify the Acolyte here in essentially is Osha, who had seen Soul as kind of like a way out and a bright point in her life essentially. She got her out. She didn't want to be a part of the cult. He was the way to get her out. He trained her. They had this connection, so to speak, and you find out that he essentially lied to her the entire time.
Yeah.
And he was literally the person that killed his mom.
Yeah.
Her mom. Sorry. And to hear that, and I think she heard it like, did he say it speaking to her, or did she overhear it while he was saying it to someone else?
Kind of like a combination of both. Like she heard him talking, and then he like admitted it to her.
Yeah, so it's really kind of like an ultimate betrayal. Someone that she thought was her ally, that she was, trying to help in a way, just was not who she thought, and that was probably the closest thing that she had to a parent after the cult.
Yeah,
and to hear that betrayal is difficult. Now, if you want to compare that to Anakin and the younglings, he was more so following an order. I don't think he felt malicious intent towards those things. He was carrying out an order.
Yeah,
and I don't think he necessarily was like, oh, I hate kids, screw kids. If this was sand and he was striking down sand, I mean, he could have blood that shit in a second.
Yes. Oh, beautiful point, man. And in that Darth Vader comic, there's actually a part when they get caught in a sandstorm that's created by this weapon, and Darth Vader's like holding the shuttle together with the Force, and he's like, I won't let the sand get us. And then the cover of the next issue is just like Darth Vader in sand. And I was like, oh, fucking Anakin, man, that sucks. But great fucking point, man. You did a great job defending the show, and then people that are for the Acolyte also defended it too. They said that like the crystal in the lightsaber was like exposed, whereas like the crystal in Anakin's lightsaber wasn't exposed. They actually did like show the crystal at one point inside the lightsaber when it like fell to the ground. But besides that, another thing, I was just watching Star Wars Explained, and he was saying that if you like put all your hatred and your emotions like into your lightsaber, like your anger and stuff like that, that's what bleeds a lightsaber. And he was saying that like Anakin was like not doing that with his lightsaber at that point. He wasn't like putting all that anger and hate into it. And then another point that came up too in the kind of Acolyte follow-up for the Star Wars Explained was he was saying that, you know, sometimes Anakin has Sith eyes and sometimes he doesn't in Revenge of the Sith. And they were saying that that's sort of like when you kind of have this like dark side overwhelming thing. And like Palpatine's actually the only one that would have those eyes all the time. But with other characters, they sometimes have the eyes, sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That kind of explains like why Cormier might not have those eyes, you know?
Yeah, and it's also not, you know, we find out a little bit more about him. We know that Vernestra recognizes him, knows him from the past. And it's not clear if he's actually a Sith or not, you know?
Right.
They're kind of mimicking that kind of rule of two Sith thing dynamic, but it's never said that they actually are. So
yes,
I think he's just really like a disillusioned Jedi at this point.
Yeah. Because he was potentially Vernestra's like Padawan or whatever, and I guess he turned to the dark side, and then she like used the whip on him. That's like what we were talking about last time we did a review.
Yeah,
you know. And so the reason why we talk about the Sith at all is because I'm looking for the fucking thing. I better hope I have this on here.
Yep.
Let's see.
I know what you're gonna say.
Well, let's see. Where the fuck is it on here? Oh, wait, no. Oh shit, I didn't have it on here, but I guess I didn't copy it. But basically, I said that like, you know, we have Plagueis, but not the Jizz guy.
Yeah, no Darth Tenebris.
Yeah,
and I had to ask you to clarify that right after I watched it, because I'm like, I didn't really get a good look at the character in the case, but I mean, it's pretty clear it's Plagueis. But you know what he's doing there and why is he like creeping around a corner is kind of up for interpretation, I suppose. I do know that Leslie Headland said that cameo was always intended, and they actually put it there as opposed to the end of the episode as to not take away from the Cormier and Osha scene at the end.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, so okay, with that whole sequence where like we do see Plagueis, I was kind of bothered by that. He looked really cool. It was weird because he simultaneously looked cool, but it was also goofy at the same time.
Yeah, he looked like a pervert, kind of like peering out through the closet, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Are you taking another bath from here?
Yeah, right. Because I mean, he looked like scary. He looked like a horror movie monster. He looks scarier than any picture I've seen of him. But then, he's just like looking like that. So, okay. So the problem with this sequence is if you read the Darth Plagueis book, which is part of the old Star Wars canon, it's basically he has that Tenebris guy as his master. He kills him, and then he eventually takes on Palpatine. But he doesn't have anybody in between. This show might imply that he had Cormier, and that Cormier takes on May as his acolyte. Osha as his acolyte in this show. You know,
my gut is telling me that they don't know each other. The Cormier
really,
they just don't know each other.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, Plagueis sees him. I'm pretty sure that they have not interacted. They're not working together at this point. I think that's where it stands. I would even go so far as to the point that potentially Cormier is even above him or in power at this point, which doesn't sound right at all. You know, it sounds incorrect, but I feel like there's going to be, you know, they haven't explained where he fits in yet, and I'm not sure. I'm not confident either way, really.
Okay, well that leads to the next part, which is that like Leslie Headland said that this show could be like a complete story unto itself, and that's it, right? And we've been talking about, is there going to be another season? Will the Disney Plus sort of make it return for another season? What are we going to do? Like, do you think they have to make a season 2 after this ending?
Yeah, no, there's too much ambiguity in the ending. There's too many things that are kind of left unsatisfying in a way. One of the things is, you know, Quamir and May and Osha are trying to escape, and for whatever reason, they decide that May is staying behind.
Yes.
I imagine that's because they only have room in the ship for 2 people. I'm imagining that. It's not said or implied, but that's the only thing I could think of for a reason to leave her behind. And
Totally. Yeah.
the mind wiping thing is kind of a stretch.
Yes.
To keep her involved in the story, and that to me is a loose end.
Oh yeah.
That they haven't fully resolved yet.
Yeah, and then she ends up essentially being recruited by Vernestra Rowe to go after Quamir, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
The mind wipe thing, I actually really hated every time the fucking kids would say that little poem or whatever, where they're like, one born of one, always two, or some kind of shit, or like whatever the fuck they would say. But I did like that they said that and they were hugging each other, and he went like this, and then she started to forget the words. I thought like, as a piece of a story, that's a good way they did that. However, he's just kind of going like this with the force, and essentially he's like fine-tuning her mind so that she doesn't remember who she is at all. You know what I'm saying? It's like she knows who she is, but she doesn't remember like the past, I don't know, 15 years of her life or so. Or she doesn't even remember her sister either.
Yeah, that's a kind of. I mean, it was a nice emotional beat.
Yeah,
but
right.
The logic behind it's a little flawed, because it's like, how do you do that so quickly and so effectively? I suppose.
Right. Exactly.
And think, oh well, he's just really powerful Sith guy. I mean, I suppose, but
yeah.
it seems a little bit of a stretch in my eyes.
Yeah, and him as a really powerful Sith guy, I actually like the idea of what you were saying before. I'm already doing some fantasy booking where it's like maybe Quamir is the apprentice out of the rule of 2. He's the apprentice to Tenebris, and Plagueis is the one that's peeping on them, and he's going to take out Quamir so that he can become Tenebris's apprentice.
Yeah, that could work.
That would be cool. And then we kind of set up the events of Darth Plagueis, the book. So I want to talk about this one thing that, Thor Skywalker brought up that I thought is a really important point. He was talking about that idea of Star Wars and the Jedi were heroes. And we were kind of talking about how it's actually okay for them to be flawed. It makes them more interesting. But he was saying that like this is kind of indicative of this new version of Star Wars and maybe media in general, where they kind of really glorify being selfish or like looking out for yourself versus the betterment of like else or those around you. And I feel like this ending does kind of capture that, because they fucking murdered a whole bunch of people, and we're supposed to kind of look at them as like these sort of like, I don't know, like tragic heroes, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's not 100% clear. I guess you could say that Indara murdered that entire coven. I guess, right?
Yeah.
And that's being covered up. All these Jedi died in this process here. In addition to the 4 that were on that mission in Brendok, all the ones that went after Quamir and that planet, they're all dead too.
Yeah.
It is a lot to cover up, and
yeah.
I think there's fair reason to kind of keep the kind of a balance. Like, I kept saying that the Jedi are flawed, but essentially I think kind of any force like that would have to be flawed. I don't think they can be perfect, but they're probably still better than any, other things in governing bodies or authoritative bodies in that galaxy. So it's, even though, they're technically doing something wrong, it may honestly be for the greater good, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah,
Because I do still believe that even if they're flawed, the Jedi are a force for good in the galaxy.
yeah. I mean, they're certainly not the fucking Empire, and I mean, look how miserable the world is under the Empire when, like, we're looking at Andor, right?
Yeah,
Remember,
yeah.
they have all these different groups that they're not even like stormtroopers and stuff, but they work with the Empire. Yeah, it's horrible. And then there's bounty hunters and all that kind of shit too. Yeah, I know. It's an interesting situation. I don't know. I think that we do need a season 2 because they need to flesh out more things. They definitely need to explain the relationship between Plagueis and Quimir at the very least.
Yeah.
Now, here's the sad thing about this show too, is that in these discussions, pretty much everyone talked about Saul. Like, everyone was like, Saul was the best character on the show. He was the best, like, the actor did the best job out of everyone. I would say the two leads, it's one fucking woman playing two characters. They were like the least interesting part of the show to me.
Well, I really did enjoy the switching between May and Osha. They were kind of aligned, as Osha was the light side and May was the dark, and they flipped. And I kind of do find that interesting. I think there is more to mine there. I do agree that I think Soul was my favorite part of the show here. I mean, in terms of performance, but I still think there's more that can be told here. I don't think there will be a season 2. I think this show cost too much money.
Oh, shit.
Was although it was critically well received, I don't believe it was watched very much, and there's a lot of people hating on it. So,
okay.
I feel like, if anything, I hope they do something with it, whether that's a comic or a novel, something. And I know that's also sometimes we get in these positions where it's kind of like, oh, maybe they could do a show, but maybe not. And if we're not going to do it, we're not going to do it at all. It's kind of like a bargaining chip,
yeah.
For the creators to kind of keep themselves involved, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I could see it going either way, but I do hope we see a little more of this point in time with these characters in some media format.
Yeah. Just like these toxic people just like go right after Kathleen Kennedy, and she's like, she's the villain, she's the one that's killing Star Wars. So many people went after Leslie Headland, and I don't necessarily think that that a lot of the decisions made for this show were the right decisions, but I do think that she cared more about Star Wars than people would say she did. Like, I think she read the High Republic books. I think she knew like Star Wars lore. I know that she went and answered a bunch of questions that not comic books explained. That's our channel. Star Wars Explained had, where he was like, he asked, or she explained that when Indara cut the link between the Coven and the Wookiee Kelnaka, that did actually kill them. I know that you and I were kind of wondering, were they knocked out? Were they killed? It actually killed them. She talked about how, and I think maybe people at Lucasfilm confirmed this too, but Anakin was not made the same way that Osha and May were made. That on the planet, Anakin himself is a virgin in the Force. He was made by the cosmic Force, whereas they were made by manipulations with the Force through a virgins.
Okay.
So
and that other layer of it being two people as well. And instead, so I don't know, maybe no, I don't know what I was going to say there, but it's probably just not right anyway. But I agree with you. I do think that this is kind of the playbook for all of these Disney movies, essentially, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars. They find kind of younger creators that have a vision, that have kind of established have established themselves in some way, creatively, but they're not huge people with a massive body of work, so that they can kind of pay them on the cheap, and then hopefully they get some kind of artistic vision out of something. And I do believe she had that. And I don't know. I think I like the show, honestly. I think I would put it somewhere in in the middle of my rankings here. I didn't do any rankings, but ultimately I did enjoy it. It has some flaws in it, and I would like to see more.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. How about this? At a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rank this show? And I'm assuming that we're saying like Andor's like a 10. What would you rank
Andor
this
is a
show?
10. Andor is a
Yeah.
10. I'm gonna give it at least a 7.
Okay. 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 I might do like a 6 for me.
Okay.
You know, maybe a 6.5. I'm not 100% sure. But one thing I wanted to bring up, it kind of goes along with your point a little bit, is that people get upset with the vision that she had as far as like the coven and it's all women and they're using the force in a different kind of way. And the thing that's interesting about that is there's been witches and stuff like that in Star Wars going all the way back to the fucking Ewok adventure. Do you remember? Did you ever see those movies?
I mean, when I was a kid, but
Yeah. Because there's a fucking like witch woman that like works with one of those like troll monster guys. Because
yeah,
there's two Ewok movies and there's like a witch woman
right.
that works with one of them, you know?
Yeah.
So like any kind of magic thing that happens in Star Wars is associated with the Force. And so they're fucking their teleportation that they do where they kind of turn into black smoke. Like that's all stuff that's been in Star Wars for like decades at this point.
Yeah,
And
I think that's a good sign of world building. I think
right.
it's to see that it's not just the Jedi and Sith that have a monopoly on the Force. I think that's interesting. I mean,
yes.
Some of their chants were kind of corny, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
But just the hate on the fact that someone else is using the Force outside of what has been established is kind of silly.
Right. Yeah, because everyone thinks that like the Force is just like pulling things, using telekinesis, choking, maybe like kind of sensing the future, sensing other people's presence, but it's a lot more than that,
Yeah.
I mean, once you get to fucking throwing lightning and stuff, it's like, you can do any kind of magic shit. Yeah.
You could do anything with the Force, honestly, and it's just a matter of who's going to think of a new creative way to use it, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's like fucking magic. Yeah. So last but not least, the very last thing that we see in this show is the back of a little green dude. Did you like that, or was that annoying? What'd you think?
I mean, on one hand, I'm like, this was supposed to be removed from Skywalker saga, and that is kind of pinning it more towards being a part of it. They didn't go to the extent that we thought they might have with actually establishing Darth Plagueis or anything like that. But showing Yoda is a clear link to that, and it makes sense. I mean, he was around then. He's one of the most storied Jedi masters in the Star Wars lore and mythology. So it makes sense to show him. But I mean, just showing the back of his head. I don't think he even said anything, did he?
No.
He should have said something.
Well, because it's almost like a fake out because she walks into this room and I think even the music sounds like a little bit sinister. And she's like, "Master, I'm sorry for interrupting you." And you kind of think, oh, is she like telepathically talking to a Sith? But then it's like, no, it's Yoda. He's right there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I thought he looked good from behind, though.
Yeah.
He definitely looks better than he did in episode 1 the first time around.
Oh yeah, I mean they spent $180 million on this TV show.
Yes, they should be able to get fucking the back of Yoda's head, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows if it was CG or a puppet? I really couldn't tell, but
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about the Acolyte?
No, that's kind of it. I do hope we get some kind of ending with some of these characters, just a little bit more, because I do feel a little. I feel like I do want a little more.
Yes. Got some blue balls filled with midichlorians. You can always tell Brian does this kind of laugh like that when I just say something that's just weird. He's like, I don't know how to fucking respond to that.
I don't know how to respond.
All right. Well, anyway, once I've said blue balls, I know that's a good time to end the recording. So we're going to go, and thanks for watching us talk about the Acolyte. Brian and I are going to record the season finale review for The Boys, which I'm sure you're pretty excited to talk about.
Yep.
And we also got Deadpool and Wolverine coming up. We appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and we will talk to you guys